The glasses are already raised when the door closes. It's late November 1947. Outside, Manhattan is cold and loud. Inside a private suite at the Waldorf Astoria, the noise dies the instant the latch clicks shut. Thick carpet swallows footsteps. Heavy curtains mute the city. The air smells faintly of cigar smoke, starch, and something metallic underneath: nerves. Crystal clinks. Not a celebration, a formality. Men stand in loose clusters, jackets still on, ties loosened just enough to suggest comfort without vulnerability. Louis B. Mayer grips his glass with both hands, not drinking yet. Jack Warner smiles without showing teeth. Harry Cohn doesn't smile at all. They've done this before, rooms like this, decisions like this, but never with this many consequences pressed into one sentence. No one is seated, that matters. At the far end of the room, Eric Johnston clears his throat. It's a small sound, barely audible, but the conversations stop anyway, not because he demands attention, because he doesn't have to. Someone laughs softly, a release laugh. It dies halfway through. Johnston doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't need to. He holds his glass at chest height, elbow tucked in, posture relaxed. A man used to rooms where power listens without being asked. There's a pause before he speaks, not hesitation, timing. In that pause, eyes flicker. Warner glances toward Mayer. Mayer stares at the carpet, then up again. A few men shift their weight. No one checks a watch. No one reaches for a cigarette. This is the moment they'll remember later, even if they don't admit it yet. Johnston begins with something harmless. A toast to cooperation, to unity, to stability in uncertain times. The words slide easily across the room. They've all spoken them before in boardrooms and press statements. Safe words, approved words. Then he changes the temperature. He doesn't announce it, he doesn't signal it, he simply lets one sentence fall into the space between them. We will not knowingly employ a communist. No emphasis, no raised eyebrow, no dramatic pause after. Just a sentence, calm, clean, procedural. The room goes still. Not frozen, worse than that, still like something waiting to see if it has been noticed. No one responds right away. Glasses remain raised midair. The silence stretches, thin and deliberate. You could count it in heartbeats if anyone were brave enough to admit their heart was racing. Mayer swallows, Warner's jaw tightens just slightly. Cohn's eyes narrow, calculating, already running numbers that don't exist on paper yet. The sentence hangs there unfinished in a way that feels intentional. It doesn't accuse, it doesn't name names, it doesn't threaten. That's the genius of it. Because it doesn't have to. Outside this room, Washington is loud with hearings and headlines. Cameras flash, names are shouted. Inside this room, there are no reporters, no transcripts, no witnesses who will testify to what happens next. Johnston lets the silence work for him. Someone clears his throat. Someone else finally takes a sip, the clink of glass against teeth sounding far too loud. The room exhales, but not in relief, in acceptance. Because everyone understands what that sentence really means. Not today, not officially, but soon. It means scripts will stop moving quietly from desk to desk. It means phone calls won't be returned. It means contracts will expire naturally. It means agents will start using careful language. It means meetings will be postponed until they disappear. It means fear will no longer need to announce itself. Johnston doesn't explain, he doesn't justify. He doesn't mention the Hollywood 10, though their names hover unspoken like smoke trapped at ceiling level. He doesn't say loyalty, he doesn't say America, he doesn't say survival. He lets the men in the room supply their own reasons. That's how it works. Warner nods once, not agreement, recognition. He's seen this move before in different rooms, different decades. The rule isn't what matters, it's who enforces it first. Mayer raises his glass a fraction higher, a subtle signal. Cohn watches him, then mirrors the movement. Around the room the gesture spreads, not enthusiasm, compliance. No one asks how knowingly will be defined, no one asks who decides, no one asks what happens to the people already employed. Those questions are dangerous because they imply limits. This sentence has none. Johnston lowers his glass, the toast is over. The decision is done, there is no vote, there is no paper to sign. That will come later, wrapped in official language and legal phrasing. But the real decision has already happened. The most powerful men in American entertainment have just agreed, without argument, without protest, that fear will be administered quietly, that it will feel administrative, that it will move faster than guilt and leave no fingerprints. And the most chilling part: no one in the room believes they are doing something cruel. They believe they are being practical. The conversations resume, but they are different now. Lower, shorter, more cautious. A joke lands and dies without laughter. Someone mentions a writer's name, then stops mid-sentence, replacing it with "you know who I mean." Eyes dart, names become risky. The room hasn't changed, the carpet is the same, the curtains still block out the city, the glasses are still half full. But something invisible has been switched on. A system. One that doesn't require lists at first, or orders or threats. Only memory. Only the knowledge that everyone else in this room heard the same sentence you did, and no one objected. As the meeting breaks apart, handshakes are brief, promises are vague, men leave in ones and twos, careful not to linger. Elevators descend silently, carrying decisions that will echo for decades. Outside, the city keeps moving. Inside, Hollywood has just learned a new language. And it is spoken without raising a voice. By the time the elevators reach the lobby, the sentence has already begun to work. No memos are sent that night. No calls are made from the Waldorf Astoria itself. That would be careless. Instead, the men disperse into the city, each carrying the same quiet understanding, each assuming correctly that the others will act first. Fear spreads fastest when no one wants to be last. In Los Angeles, time zones work in their favor. By the time studio offices open the next morning, New York's decision has already aged into inevitability. Assistants notice it before executives do. A script is left on a desk instead of being rooted. A meeting is rescheduled. A casting discussion stalls without explanation. Nothing dramatic happens. That's the point. At Warner Bros., department heads receive no instructions, but they sense the shift immediately. It shows up in tone, in hesitation, in the sudden carefulness of words like reliable, safe, and good for the picture. Names once spoken casually now trigger a pause, a glance toward the office door, a subtle lowering of the voice. Agents feel it within days. Calls that used to be returned within the hour now drift unanswered. When they do connect, the conversations are shorter, vague. Not the right time. The studio's going another direction. Nothing personal. It is always personal. It is never admitted. Writers feel it next. Not the famous ones, the ones with Oscars and leverage. Not yet. It reaches the working writers first. The ones who rewrite dialogue without credit. The ones who fix third acts overnight, the ones who keep the machine moving while remaining mostly invisible. Their contracts don't get canceled, they simply aren't renewed. A script sits untouched, a check doesn't arrive, an agent stops pushing. At first they assume it's coincidence. Hollywood has always been arbitrary, cruelty is not new, but then patterns emerge. Conversations repeat themselves with eerie similarity. Different studios, same phrasing, same careful distance. We're being cautious right now. Cautious about what? No one says. Because saying it would make it real. Inside studio offices, executives begin doing something far more dangerous than enforcing rules. They begin anticipating them. Before a name is suggested, someone quietly removes it from consideration. Before a meeting happens, someone decides it shouldn't. This is where the sentence from the Waldorf becomes something else. Not a policy. A reflex. Eric Johnston does not call to follow up. He doesn't need to. The genius of the statement was that it outsourced enforcement. Each studio now polices itself, terrified of being seen as the weak link, the one that didn't get the message. Silence becomes proof of loyalty. In Washington, hearings continue. Cameras capture faces. Headlines scream accusations, but those spectacles matter less than what's happening quietly on studio lots thousands of miles away. Because the real damage is being done without witnesses. A producer pauses before hearing a writer he likes, not because he believes the accusations but because belief is irrelevant. Risk is what matters now. He imagines a phone call from New York, an uncomfortable question, a raised eyebrow. He chooses someone else. That writer never knows why. At MGM, a department secretary notices a list on a desk. Not labeled, just names, some circled, some crossed out. She doesn't ask, she's learned better. Asking creates memory and memory creates danger. At Columbia, Harry Cohn is already ahead of the curve. He doesn't wait for pressure, he applies it. He makes examples not publicly, not dramatically, but efficiently. Writers are dismissed with polite explanations, no accusations, no appeals. If they protest, he shrugs. This is bigger than me. That phrase spreads too. Agents begin advising clients to stay quiet, to stop attending meetings, to avoid organizations, to sign statements they don't fully read. Silence becomes currency. The quieter you are, the safer you feel. But safety is temporary. What none of them realize yet is that the sentence spoken at the Waldorf has removed the most important protection they had: clarity. There are no rules to follow, no threshold to stay beneath, no way to prove innocence. Knowingly is a word without edges. It can stretch to include association, rumor, memory, or nothing at all. That uncertainty is intentional. Fear works best when it is imprecise. In private homes across Los Angeles, conversations change, friends stop visiting, phones ring less often, invitations dry up, people begin editing their pasts, rewriting harmless moments into liabilities. A meeting attended 10 years ago, a petition signed without thought, a friend who once introduced someone to someone else. Everyone becomes an archivist of their own mistakes. And the studios let it happen. They don't have to threaten, they don't have to accuse. The system does it for them. Each person's imagination supplies consequences more severe than anything explicitly stated. That's how control deepens. One writer, mid-career, respected but not famous, is called into a meeting. He expects notes. He receives sympathy instead. The executive leans back, folds his hands, and says softly, "We just can't move forward right now." The writer asks why. The executive doesn't answer. He looks tired, almost apologetic. "You understand." The writer nods, even though he doesn't. Or rather, he does. The sentence from the Waldorf has reached him now, without ever being repeated. In the months that follow, studios release statements. Clean, formal, carefully worded, they frame decisions as values, as responsibility, as protection of the industry. What they don't say is that the real enforcement has already happened, quietly, efficiently, without dissent. The men who raised their glasses that night did not need to coordinate further. They trusted fear to do the rest. And it does. By early 1948, the blacklist exists in everything but name. Careers stall, lives constrict. People who once shaped American culture vanish from it, not in scandal but in absence. The most unsettling part is how quickly everyone adjusts. This becomes normal. That normalization is the true victory of the sentence. Because once fear feels administrative, it stops feeling cruel. And once that happens, it can last a very long time. Years pass before anyone calls it what it is. At the time, it feels temporary, necessary, an adjustment. That's how most people survive it, by believing it will end before it reaches them. But the sentence spoken at the Waldorf doesn't age, it settles. By the early 1950s, Hollywood has learned how to live with it. The blacklist no longer needs defending, it no longer needs explanation. It has become a background condition like smog or heat, unpleasant but assumed. What changes is how people behave when they think no one is watching. Writers begin using pseudonyms not as protest, as survival. Scripts are delivered through intermediaries, payments are routed quietly, credits become puzzles understood only by those who need to understand them. Everyone knows, no one says. Producers who once prided themselves on taste now pride themselves on caution. They don't ask whether someone is talented, they ask whether someone is clean. The word is never defined, it doesn't have to be. Clean simply means untouched by suspicion. And suspicion by now is everywhere. Some of the men in that Waldorf suite begin to feel the weight of it, not publicly, not dramatically, but privately. Mayer grows more withdrawn, Warner becomes sharper, more defensive. Cohn leans into control, using the system he helped normalize to assert dominance over people who have fewer options every year. None of them admit regret. Regret would imply responsibility. Instead, They tell themselves the same thing they told themselves that night: this is bigger than any one person. That belief becomes the final shield. For those on the outside, the damage compounds quietly. Marriages strain under financial pressure and social isolation. Former friends cross the street rather than risk being seen together. Children grow up absorbing the tension without understanding its source. Careers don't end with explosions, they erode. A writer who once worked steadily now scrapes by on anonymous assignments. A director teaches night classes under a false name. An actor leaves the country not to escape accusation but to escape waiting. Waiting is the cruelest part. Waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for a rumor to die, waiting for a moment to pass that never does. And all of it traces back to a sentence spoken calmly, without malice, by a man who believed he was preserving order. Years later, when hearings lose their grip and public interest moves on, Hollywood does not immediately change. Systems built on fear don't collapse when the fear fades. They linger, they become habits. Even when the blacklist officially dissolves, its logic remains. Executives still avoid risk. Studios still value compliance over brilliance. People still remember how fast the room went silent in 1947, even if they can't remember exactly why. That's the lasting consequence. Not the ruined careers, though there are many. Not the broken lives, though there are those too. It's the lesson absorbed by everyone who watched it happen: that power does not need to shout, that destruction does not require violence, that the most permanent decisions can be made politely over drinks behind closed doors. Years later, some of the men who were in that room speak about the era with distance, with abstraction. They refer to pressures and circumstances. They talk about the Cold War as if it were weather. None of them describe the pause before the sentence was spoken. None of them talk about the way no one objected. Because that's the part that's hardest to live with. The realization that nothing forced them, that there was no countdown, no ultimatum, no armed guard at the door, only a shared understanding that going along was easier than standing still. The fear wasn't imposed. It was accepted. And once accepted, it outlived everyone who created it. The Waldorf Astoria still stands. Its rooms host different conversations now, different decisions, but the walls remember, not in sound but in pattern. The pattern of men agreeing without debate, of power moving without resistance, of silence doing the work words no longer need to do. The sentence that ended hundreds of careers was never shouted, it was never argued, it was never even written down that night. Which is why it worked. Because the most dangerous decisions in history rarely announce themselves. They arrive calmly. They sound reasonable. And by the time anyone realizes what they've done,